Well, welcome back to How to Actually Change the World. We are so excited. We have had the chance to interview some awesome people, and today is no different. But my name is Darvin Wentes.
I am Ray Pearson-Ben.
And we're your hosts. And before we get started, we would like to ask you to go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, go ahead and hit the bell notification if you're watching on YouTube. That way you can get notified every single time an episode drops. Today's an awesome interview. We have a friend of mine. His name is Justin Pipes. Justin is an alumni of the university, and he's actually a double alumni. Is that correct?
Wow. That is correct.
Yeah. He graduated his undergrad in 2015, and he graduated law school in 2019. So
hold on a second, though. But I'm just telling you, the name had me thinking something a little bit different. I just knew you were going to come in here and just bust out, belt out a tune. I was like, Pipes. Justin Pipes sounds like a name that his agent came up with, and he is going to debut his album.
No, I do get that a lot, though. I do get that a lot.
It's a great name.
Thanks.
Oh, my gosh. Well, Justin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us something, just a fun fact about yourself.
Fun fact about myself? I don't even know. Well, I can say that I have sung before.
Really?
I was a lead singer in a band a long time ago.
But I will hear, folks.
I will never.
Can I say that was discernment?
Oh my gosh!
It was not, folks. It wasn't. I just love the name. Wow.
But I will never drop a solo album.
No, so you don't feel led of the spirit to sing?
Not at all. Not at all.
I really want to hear this. Is there any YouTube clips out there of you singing?
I hope not. Yeah,
I will go searching.
I doubt it.
And the folks at home are searching right now.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Please don't.
Oh man. Okay, we'll stop making him uncomfortable about the singing.
He's good. He's good.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your Regent story? So I already shared that you graduated here, but just give us a little bit of a rundown. What made you come to Regent?
Yeah. So like you said, I went to Regent for a long time. I did both my undergrad and law school here. I came to Regent my sophomore year of college after doing my freshman year of college at a state university in Missouri. Wasn't a big fan and was looking for something different. Prayed for a long time and felt like the Lord was calling me here to Regent University. And so I moved, across the country, came here.
Wow.
I loved going here for undergrad, made friends right away. I felt like when I came here that this was where I belonged.
Mm-hmm.
I just met a bunch of people who were similar to me and just clicked right away. And of course, it's, there are difficult things too. Mm-hmm. Academically, Regent is not the easiest school for good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I rather actually learn things in college than just pass with a 4.0 and then not know what to do afterwards.
Yeah.
And so then after graduating undergrad, I worked for the university for a little bit and then decided to go to law school here.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome. So you worked here, so you got the full Regent experience. You got to be an employee of Regent. You got to study at Regent, all sides. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your law school experience? Because that's the one that most people are like, oh my gosh, they went to law school. Man, they must be a brainiac if they went to law school, or oh my gosh, that's a lot of work. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. It definitely is a lot of work. And I did law school. I wouldn't suggest doing law school the way that I did law school because I worked full time for the university while I was going to law school. That's how I was paying for law school. Okay. But that meant that technically I was a part-time student, but I still took basically a full class load while working 40 hours a week. And so it was just long work days on top of having to study for law school. Which was not super fun.
Flunk out, basically.
No, basically not. And it was stressful. That was part of the learning curve was learning to handle that amount of work and that amount of stress.
Yeah.
And so, but then after my second year of law school, going into my third year, I quit my job at the university to become a full-time student so I could graduate within the 3 years. Because if you're a part-time student, it takes a little bit longer. Traditionally, law school is a 3-year period. Regent used to have like a 2-year accelerated program.
Wow.
Which would have been, a lot. But they don't let you work at all if you do that for a good reason. But if you're a part-time student, since you have to take less classes, it could be 4 to 5 years. And so I wanted to graduate in the traditional 3 years because all of my friends were graduating, and I didn't want to be in school longer because I had already been in school for a long time.
Your tribe was leaving. So.
Right. And so I decided to just become a full-time student, take classes over the summer, and graduate on time. So, yeah.
Well, you told me a little bit about Justin, where I think some of what happened afterwards took you to St. Louis, but now I'm hearing he's like in Wichita. You're in Wichita, right?
In Kansas City.
Yes.
Okay, he's in
Kansas City now. Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell me, I guess, what happened to you once you left Regent University?
Yeah. So when I graduated law school in 2019, when you graduate law school, you're not done. You still have to take the bar. And the bar is at the end of July. And so I went home to St. Louis, Missouri, where my parents live, and decided to live with them while I studied for the bar because I didn't want to have to basically worry about anything. Like, I didn't want to have to worry about grocery shopping or going and doing a bunch of stuff.
Awesome, aren't they?
Yeah, super nice.
Yeah, they are.
And during that time, studying for the bar is a full-time job. You sign up for a bar course or a bar study plan, and it's 8 hours a day. So it's like a full-time job.
Goodness.
And so you can't really work on top of that.
Yeah.
And so, I went home to St. Louis, studied for the bar, took the bar, and then while I was applying for jobs, I was still in St. Louis.
Okay.
And that was just kind of a temporary thing until I got a job. And so the first job that I got was in Wichita, Kansas. And after applying literally all over the country, I kept praying for the Lord to just open the door to the job that he wanted me to go to and close all the other doors. And so there were
I love that prayer.
Yeah. Especially when there are times where you have multiple interviews and you think ones are going well and you don't really know which is the best one. Or at least
money isn't always the win.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so it's just okay, Lord, well, keep opening the door, all the doors to the job that you want me to be in, and close the doors for the jobs that you don't want me to be in. And the doors that kept opening were this job in Wichita. And explaining that to people was you're moving to Wichita, Kansas? And I was yeah, I am. But, and Wichita is a fine city. But, it's not necessarily one graduating out of law school where it's I'm going to move to Wichita, Kansas. But yeah, that's where I felt the Lord was leading me to. And so I moved there at the beginning of 2020, about 2 weeks before things went into lockdown. I moved there the end of February, and things started going into lockdown mid-March. And I don't have family or friends or knew anybody prior to moving there. So moved there.
So it was you and the Lord.
Yeah, so it was me and the Lord. And honestly, during that time, I felt like the Lord brought me to that job to protect me during the pandemic, because it was the one type of job that I got that didn't lay people off. It still provided a bunch of really good on-hand experience in the law field. Yeah. They still were able to help me get my license in Kansas and different things. Whereas if I would have gotten some of the jobs that I had applied for, even though they may have on paper looked like better jobs, a lot of those companies laid people off. Wow. And first in,
tired.
Right, exactly, first in, first out type of thing. And so I feel like the Lord was no, we're going to bring you here. You may not think it's a great idea, but
it's
ended up being
when
good.
He hides you.
Yeah.
And you're in the flesh, you're wondering why am I being hidden?
Yeah.
And then you find out later.
Right,
Yep.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Praise God. That's so awesome that like you had so many options. Your prayer was, Lord, open the doors to the right one.
Mm-hmm.
And here the right one is going to a place that isn't like everyone's, oh, this is where I want to go.
Right.
But it was the place where you remained and you were able to remain instead of the other places where you may have moved halfway across the country
Right.
and then been left high and dry, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And I know people that happened to,
yeah.
where they moved. Like my own sister, she moved to New York in January of 2020. And then things started going. I mean, New York was like epicenter, right?
Yeah.
And so luckily she was able to like work remote, but she just like ended up moving back to St. Louis because didn't want to stay in downtown New York.
And moving is quite an investment right there.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Man,
So-
that's wild. So tell us a little bit about that experience of like moving to a new place in the height of the pandemic. I mean, that was, March 2020. Everything shut down and you
We
had just
remember it
freshly
well.
moved
Right.
there.
Right.
It's wild that we could talk about this now. It feels like we're in
Yeah.
a post-apocalyptic movie sometimes,
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it's rough because, like I said, I didn't have family or friends in Wichita, and I was moving there thinking like, okay, well, this is gonna be a fresh start. Like, hopefully, I'll be able to meet people pretty quickly, and then right away, it was like, actually, no, you're not gonna be able to meet anybody for several months. And like, if you were to look at my fitness app on my phone, during the month of March, it was like I was averaging like not even walking a mile a day because I would just get up, go walk to my
Walk
car.
to the kitchen.
Right. I saw during that time I was one of the few workers at my job that was still required to come into the office.
Oh, okay.
So I never worked from home, which was kind of nice because it created routine. But at the same time, like most of the people, like it was me and 4 other people in the building. So it was me, my direct supervisor, and like 2 other people. And so, yeah. So it basically felt like working from home because it's not like I'm surrounded by a bunch of people that I get to know. And so, yeah, it's just
So you stayed the new guy for a while.
for a while. Yeah, exactly. And so in April of 2020, I adopted a dog, which was honestly life-changing because it gave me a reason to go outside. I got to walk him around like I lived in downtown Wichita, and so I just would walk everywhere with him. And so that was really great. But then it wasn't until I think late June things started opening back up, and that's when even like churches started having people back in person and stuff. And so I started going to a church and got plugged in pretty quick, and then from there was able to make friends.
Praise God.
And so that was really good. But yeah, those first several months I watched a lot of TV.
Didn't we all?
Yeah, ordered a lot of takeout, but also did a lot of experimental cooking. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say that folks who delivered food were first responders.
Yep.
So we really appreciated them.
Yeah, we
And
do.
the whole no touch, and they'd leave it on the porch, you know, and yeah.
Right.
Can you tell me about what you're now doing at your position and
Sure.
what those challenges are that you face daily?
Yeah. So now I'm in a new job than the one I was in Wichita. So from Wichita earlier this year, that job I had gotten was only a 2-year contract. And after the 2 years, I decided not to renew because I wasn't a super big fan of the area of law that I was working in.
And
And
what area of law was that?
it was debt collection litigation. And
Sounds exciting.
yeah. So I was going to court throughout all of Kansas, like in district courts throughout the entire state, and I would represent primarily medical providers like hospitals and doctors, and suing people who hadn't paid their bills.
Gotcha.
So doing debt collection, which is just super fun. People love paying their debts. They don't.
Y'all got that right.
So after 2 years of doing that, especially during a pandemic, I didn't like doing that. Plus,
I
it
can
was
see that being really challenging, though. You know, it's in a time where people were very sensitive to illness. You know, not just having COVID, but people were now very sensitive to people who were suffering.
Yep.
And then you having to do that. So
Yeah.
Right.
And just the fact that there's so much, like, with the high cost of healthcare, like, debt sometimes is just, it happens with high cost of
Right.
healthcare. So I imagine there's just so many people. Like, I mean, you probably had like 30 other lawyers that were doing the exact same thing on that
Yeah.
same day, you know, which is like that's hard.
Yeah.
And that could be grueling because on one hand, it's, you know, the right thing is to pay your debts. And then on the other hand, it's
You
this
have sick
person,
people.
this person was sick and couldn't do it. And
Right.
They have no job and they can't do it. You know?
Right. Well, and
So-
sometimes you're, you know, talking to somebody in court and having them relive the worst day of their life, which is rough.
Yeah.
And like, especially as a Christian, like you have a lot of sympathy and empathy for these individuals and you want to help them. But at the same time, as a lawyer, you are supposed to be a zealot advocate for your client.
Yep.
And so you have to do your job. And it's hard.
Yep.
that's a challenge in
Yeah.
itself.
That is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
I can imagine. So what area of law did you move to?
So now I am corporate counsel for a big company. So no longer going to court. Now I do contract review and negotiation, which is just more in line with the things that I felt like I was good at coming out of law school and the things that I want to do long term. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
So you're the person that I go to with all my contracts. So I handle contracts on behalf of the marketing department, and so you're the person that I go to review all of these things.
Right.
So what brought you into that? And we'll answer this question, and then we'll take a quick break. But what brought you into, like, why did you want to do contracts and reviewing and negotiation?
Yeah. So I've always felt like contracts, review and negotiation, and especially like negotiation is just one of my strong suits. In law school, I took a lot of negotiation classes, and then contracts was one of my stronger classes. And I just enjoy going back and forth with people and trying to make the deal. And so this
So you're
position
the
is.
closer.
I wouldn't say I'm Keira Sedgwick, but but I do like helping our company close deals, you know, as best as we can.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So this job just kind of ended up being the perfect fit, and they were eager to hire somebody who was younger, who maybe didn't have a ton of experience, because my previous job wasn't necessarily in line with this job. There was a lot of negotiation and getting people to pay their debts, but it's not a one-for-one type of comparison. But now I've moved into this job, and it just seems like a lot better fit for me.
That's awesome. Well, praise God. This is really cool. We'll get back to this, and we'll continue talking about some of these other things that you've been doing. But we will be taking a quick break. We'll be right back. Think you can change the world? So do we. Regent University offers Christ-centered associate, bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in more than 150 areas of study, including business, communication and the arts, counseling, cybersecurity, divinity, education, government, law, leadership, nursing, healthcare, and psychology. Courses are offered online and on campus in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Learn more at www.regent.edu. And we are back. We've been having a really great discussion with Justin, talking about his new position and some of the work that he's been doing, some of the areas of law that he's gotten experience in, and what you're 3 years out of college now, or out of law school, and you've already gotten some pretty cool experience in some different areas of law, some that a little less, exciting, and
But
some
it
a
still
little more
grew him.
exciting.
Yeah, it might
and
not have been the perfect fit, but I'm sure he learned a lot
yes.
when
Yeah,
he was there
for sure.
for
Yeah.
the season.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about why you think it's important to study law?
It's a great question, but it's important to study law because you never realize how much a lawyer is needed. Like there's like that saying where everybody hates lawyers until they need one, because everybody is going to need one at some point.
Yep.
And the practice of law is so broad and varied that they could pretty much work in any type of business or company, like, or anything that you may need, whether you're starting your own small business or you're getting married or ending a marriage or adopting a child or getting out of a speeding ticket. Like, these are all things that lawyers help people with. So it's a very important area to study.
Yeah.
I happen to have the honor of going to chancellor's forums on the campus, and that's when our chancellor, Dr. Robertson, goes around and speaks at the different schools and kind of gives them insight because he has a lot of wisdom to offer. And one thing that he talked about at one of the last forums was about, I think a student said, how do you know what you're supposed to do with your life? And he said, what is it that you were good at as a child? What is it that you fell in love with as a kid that you love to do? Think about those things. Do you think you can apply that question to what you like to do when you were, your younger self and see that law was the direction that you should have gone in and that you did go in?
Yeah. I think for me, that may not apply.
Really?
Sorry.
So what was it? Now I'm really curious.
I'm curious
What
too.
did you like to do as a kid?
I mean, as a kid, I was convinced I was going to be a pro baseball player.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Competitive.
Who's your favorite
Lawyer.
team?
The Dodgers.
The Dodgers.
Best team in baseball.
I bet.
Uh-oh, I guess he
I'm
did.
a Yankees fan.
Okay. I would say the Mets only by association. My neighbor, who is a Regent grad, and works at CBN, Mets all the way.
Mets
So
fan.
I'm going for the Mets.
Well, maybe by the time that this podcast airs, we'll know for sure. But when we're recording, the Dodgers are best team in baseball.
Oh my gosh.
But you were competitive at that time, or at least
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So competitive. I'm a middle child
Okay.
of 5, and so I guess you could also say, like, the bridge builder. Some of the negotiation and compromising comes in being a middle child. So some of that I think is applicable, but I do think that for me, becoming a lawyer was something that I realized more as I became an adult. Even like my undergrad here at Regent, I studied criminal justice, and I thought that I was going to go into some type of law enforcement. I had applied to the police academy right out of undergrad. Thought I was going to use that as a pathway to get into some type of federal position like FBI or U.S. Marshals or something like that. But it wasn't until I started working for the university that I realized that I could do law school or afford law school. And so a couple weeks before I was supposed to start the police academy almost the same week that the LSAT, which is the test you have to take to get into law school, they were happening the same week. And so I decided to pull out of the police academy, even though that's like a 10-month application process and everything, and use those like 2 weeks to study for the LSAT so I could get into law school.
That's wild.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. 2 weeks to study for the LSAT.
Yeah, I mean, I just needed to get a very specific score since I was working for the university. And so, yeah, I was able to get the score I needed to get into the school.
That's a
is
big deal,
awesome.
though.
Yeah, that is really cool. So, tell me about this. And we didn't dive into a little bit of your growing up. We did a little bit, but were you always a very I'm straight A student in high school, middle school? That time, were you a
100%.
book nerd?
I wouldn't say I
Was
was
that
like
100% sarcastic? That I
No.
just heard you were 100%.
Yeah, like I definitely had straight
Wow.
A's.
Wow.
I think in high school I had 1 B in a class.
My goodness.
And it was a weighted class, so the weighted GPA made it an A,
Wow.
which is different.
He
but
was that guy.
but I wasn't like, I didn't take like AP classes or anything like that though.
Gotcha.
Because I didn't want. I saw a bunch of people doing that, and it seemed to me like it was too much stress for not a big payoff.
Yeah.
Like I know it helps you pay for some college credit and stuff ahead of time, And some people can go into college having taken a lot of AP courses and be like a sophomore immediately or even a junior immediately. But I didn't really want to do that, so I just stuck to like normal classes and did well at normal classes.
Gotcha. What was your favorite class growing up?
Favorite class, does PE count? I mean, I liked a lot of classes. I mean, I really enjoyed PE, but then science was a big one. I took a bunch of science classes. Like in high school, one of my favorite classes was organic chemistry. And then it was first semester, it had this really long, dumb title. We called it just qual, but it was like semi-micro qualitative analysis. And then second semester, it became organic chemistry. And essentially, you just got to spend a lot of time in the lab, and I enjoyed that.
That's cool. So semi-micro, so it's looking at microscopic things and judging the qualities?
I have no idea why it was called that. Like, no idea. It was essentially like we were given a vial full of like chemicals, and we had to go through a process to figure out what the chemicals were. Yeah. And you're just following instructions.
That's awesome.
Well, I figured that he must have been a scholar when he was, arrived at the campus, just because working full time and really being almost, or maybe by title you weren't a full time student because you worked, but you were pretty much a full time student, and then being able to determine that I'm going to just shift it a little bit and still graduate on time, even though. So you had to at least have some good time management and be committed to what you were doing.
Yeah, it takes knowing a process to be able to say make the moves to actually go through with that process. And so I mean that's a very lawyerly mind.
Lawyerly.
Yes.
Lawyerish.
Yes. So how would you say you have seen, and this is very off the cuff for me, how have you seen like language being a very important thing within your life? So I work with contracts all the time, and so I'm reading through these terms and conditions, and I'm trying to get the best terms and conditions for the university, and that's what our lawyer's trying to do as well. So how have you seen like your understanding of language be incredibly important to the work that you're doing?
Words are very important, especially in contracts. You want to be as concise and specific as you can when you want, but other times, depending on what you want out of a contract, you want to be broad or vague. And so knowing the difference between that and how grammar helps you in that is very important. And I've seen myself, even in conversations, I think that the cadence of my speak has changed because I think about what I'm about to say a lot more than I used to. Before, I think I would speak a lot without thinking, and then now I'm like, okay, no, we need to stop.
Every word counts.
Every word is super important because especially if you, in court, like when I did litigation, the other side can pick apart what you're saying to their advantage, and so you need to make sure that you choose the right words to best represent your client.
And what you say could just completely open up the case for them. And so you got to watch what you say. I think that many of us with living life and having experiences and having to have dealt with contracts, that is where lawyers really have value for us, because lawyerly speak, it's challenging.
It is.
And contracts are written sometimes in such a way that the person that has to sign on that dotted line is completely lost. And they really need someone on their side to make it plain.
Whoever's signing needs to know what they're signing, right? And they need to make sure that they're aware of all the terms and conditions. But I definitely agree, lawyers use a lot of language where you're just like, did we have to say it like that? Or
of course you did.
I mean, there are definitely contracts that I review now where it's a paragraph is one sentence. It's just like the longest run-on sentence, and you're like, I get it, but at the same time, we could cut this up and it would make sense.
That kind of reminds me a little bit of Paul, like, and his writings is like there's so many run-on sentences in Paul.
Well, he was a Pharisee.
He
so
was.
He was, the brightest of the bright people.
Oh my goodness. So why don't you just share a little bit of what you think is a good reason for students to come to law school at Regent and also to be an undergrad at Regent. Since
Yeah.
you've got both of those experiences, why don't you just let them know, like, hey, what was it that made it so great for you that could be great for them?
Yeah. I'll speak to law school first, since that's the most fresh for me. Law school here at Regent is really strong academically. It's difficult, and it's sometimes hard to explain that to future employers. Like, I didn't graduate with, on paper, like the best GPA, but in practice, when I am doing things, I can tell that I have a better understanding than some other people who don't, or who have on paper a better GPA than I did. Because here at Regent, they are rigorous and they grade you very fairly. And in a way that, like I said, on paper, it might look like you're not doing great, but it's like, no, you kind of deserved that grade based off of your understanding of the text or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you're going to learn really well here. You're also going to get a lot of really great practical experience. Regent Law has a lot of really good practical classes. Like I said, I took a lot of negotiation classes, which are very practical in all sets of law. I took a trial practice class, which was like mock trials. And one of the professors here, or at least when I was here, and I think he's still here, is just like a crazy genius, and he presides as the judge. And learning from him is just really amazing, because he will interject at times to tell you about how you're doing, and then it's like watching him play chess against himself, because he'll say, like, you should have said this, but then the other side
Before
will
both
object
sides.
like this,
Yep.
but then
Wow.
you could respond like this if they, depending on the
So
language
he
they
knows all the
choose.
moves.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And so learning from him is really great. But then, of course, in Regent overall, being a Christian university, and being a Christian university that is actually a Christian university, that's a really big plus.
Yeah.
Because you get to have conversations about applying and where the Lord is leading you, and people here get that.
Yep.
Because in outside of the Regent bubble, people don't get that. Like, explaining this whole backstory about all of my moving and stuff, when somebody asks, I'm like, how in depth do I go? Or like, when I know that I'm talking to somebody who's not a Christian, if I say, I felt like the Lord was calling me to all these different places, they would just be like, okay, weirdo. Or like, you may not get the job that you're applying for. And not to say that you shouldn't be outspoken about your faith or anything, but the Lord gives you wisdom on how to answer questions like that.
Yeah, for sure.
And then being here at Regent, though, you have a freedom to just be open about all those different things that you just don't get at a lot of places.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's wild. The time always flies by
It
when
does.
we're having these conversations, because they're such great conversations. But we have time for one more question. This is our namesake. This is what we ask all of our guests. What would you say is the way that someone can actually change the world? How does someone actually change the world?
I think somebody changes the world by following the Lord. Like, if you are somebody who is in the Word and in prayer every day, and you have the Holy Spirit living inside you, guiding you, leaning on the Lord's understanding and not your own, He's going to bring you to the places that He wants you to be in to cause the change that He wants to happen.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to ignore that. Now, changing the world sounds like big and scary and everything, or it sounds like you need to do something drastic or huge, but the world can change with a lot of people doing small things at a time.
Yep.
And so for me, that's what I felt like the Lord has done in my life, that I'm just following what He's calling me to do, and I can be a light in places, or the salt of the earth in places that may not have seen a Christian who isn't the stereotypical, like, media bent Christian, So just portraying the Lord in Christ-like ways.
Yeah. Praise God. Well, that was an awesome answer, and this has been such a fun conversation. Thank you for joining us today,
Thank
Justin.
you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you all for also joining us and listening / watching if you're watching on YouTube. Again, we ask you to leave a comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification, so that way you can get notified every single time we drop an episode. This has been How to Actually Change the World. My name is Darvin Wentes.
I'm Ray Pearson Ben.
And we'll see you on the next one.